Hello, folks. This Friday morning, our show is sponsored by one of my favorite sponsors, SunsetLakeSabadell.com. Use the code Left is Best. You will get 20% off. Sunset Lake grows, harvests, and ships all of its craft Sabadell products directly from its farm up in northern Vermont, straight to your door. Sunset Lake is a vertically integrated farm that aims to provide affordable Sabadell products to everybody. They grow their own Sabadell. They provide testing paperwork with every order by a third party, and they're going to help you with any and all questions. They're mostly employee-owned. They $20 minimum wage when they start the harvest. They don't believe in using AI or bots to steer you in circles. When you get in touch with Sunset Lake, you're going to talk to a real-life person. They're also movement partners. They have donated tens of thousands of dollars over the years to things like strike relief funds, carceral reform, Planned Parenthood, refugee resettlement. They've engaged in mutual aid up in Vermont in the wake of the floods, food pantries, on and on and on. Great bunch of people. And on top of all that, they have a great product. They don't use pesticides. They use integrated pest management, regenerative farming. And for me, the big one is the Goodnight oil. But they have so many different types of tinctures in so many different flavors and concentration. They also have smokables. They have pre-rolls. They have keef. They have flour. They have all sorts of gummies. Focus gummies. I barely have any left.
Yeah, you're always popping those.
But they have all sorts of gummies. Some with ashwagandha mushroom. This one has cordyceps in it. They have some with some THC. They get a wide range of gummies you should check out. They also have things like tinctures for your pets. They have lotions to hydrate your skin. They got salves that help you with your muscles. I use it for my eczema, but your use may vary. Right now, you can also, not only can you get 20% off with Left is Best, but if you create an account on Sunset Lake Sabadell's website, you can start earning rewards points and earn 10% back on all your purchases. If your order is over $75, they will ship your order for free. You can also refer your friends to Sunset Lake Sabadell. Send them a coupon for their first order, and you'll earn $10 store credit. Sustainable farming practices, sun-grown hemp. Sunset Lake Sabadell grows all its hemp outdoors in the big, bright, beautiful sun. No pesticides. Use the coupon code LEFTISBEST, all one word, for 20% off your entire order at sunsetlakesabadell.com. Quick break. Not quick break.
Well,
actually,
time for the show.
Time for the show.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder, where every day's Casual Friday. That means Monday is Casual Monday, Tuesday, Casual Tuesday, Wednesday, Casual Hump Day, Thursday, Casual Thurs, that's what we call it, and Friday, Casual Shabbat. The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
It is Friday, May 30th, 2025. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, executive editor of the American Prospect, David Dayen, will be joining us for a simulcast.
Whoa!
With their Prospect Week in Review show. Also on the program today, Supreme Court allows Trump to cancel humanitarian parole, potentially revoking the legal immigrant status of 240,000 Ukrainians, and then another 250,000 Cuban, Venezuelan, Haitians, and Nicaraguans. This after Trump gets a temporary stay of the tariff court ruling that his tariffs are illegal, only, of course, for the purpose of appeal. Meanwhile, in a bid to stop taco trades, Donald Trump says China violated our trade agreement that we supposedly had with that. RFK pulls funding for pandemic flu vaccine.
No big deal.
This after his child health care report cites fake studies.
Yeah. Yep.
Meanwhile, new report, Trump regime knew that the vast majority of the Venezuelans sent to the El Salvador gulag, not guilty of any U.S. crimes. They knew it. In the wake of Stephen Miller's demand to quintuple the daily ICE detentions, top ICE officials pulled from their posts. And Trump now pardoning anybody for any crime if they were outspoken MAGA supporters. Trump hires Peter Thiel's Palantir to build surveillance data bank on every American.
That's a little, concerning.
And foreign visitor spending to drop nearly $9 billion this year.
We are great again, baby.
What is that?
I don't know. It's
What is
Friday.
that
It's from
Emma's
from my
drunk
heart.
from her from the Knicks last night. All this and more on today's Majority Report.
You are mistaking my lack of sleep, which could be mistaken for drunkenness. I'm feeling a little loose, feeling a little giggly. We were laughing earlier about Eric Adams, so I'm bringing.
Where's the where's Emma?
Yeah, I'm here. It's all right. I'm feeling. We're having fun today. This is the energy I'm bringing to the show today.
All right.
God did that. I believe that too.
Someone's saying that my shirt looks like I slept in a dumpster. That's not
It's really rude.
it is. All right. It's casual Friday.
God did that.
First of all, how dare you?
Thank you for that. We got a lot to get to. The Supreme Court story is just breaking this morning, and so don't have too many details on it. But essentially, it is opening the way for Trump to get to revoke legal status for almost like 550,000 migrants who are here because there's something either extremely dangerous for them in their country or extremely dangerous for everybody in their country. I think it's fairly obvious. If you're Ukrainian, whether you're Cuban or Venezuelan. Now, this is not to be confused with the temporary protected status. This is a different status that has been in use for at least 60 some odd years, at least. But apparently, Trump can pull that away, just like Trump is attempting to pull away student visas for people who have made plans. I mean, these are real human beings. I think it goes without saying, but these are real human beings who are relying on promises that were made by the United States and obligations that were made that then they have the rug pulled out from under them. And I would imagine for some percentage, I don't know how big, the idea that they went to the United States and the idea that they may go back to those countries could put them in a lot of jeopardy. Certainly, I don't know if there are Afghanis under that classification, but certainly I would imagine there are going to be some. But let's get into the latest regarding the tariff. As you know, the court that specifically deals with tariffs and trade found that Trump's invocation of the tariffs under the Emergency Economic Powers Act was wrong and illicit. That ruling has been stayed for the sake of appeals. In the meantime, Donald Trump, as you know, you played this clip yesterday,
right,
much to my chagrin, because I found this clip to be one of the most fascinating clips of Donald Trump in ages. Donald Trump was asked about this new acronym that is being used by Wall Street traders called TACO, which is Trump always
chickens out.
Chickens out.
It's a chicken taco.
And
I am hungry.
And Trump always chickens out. And apparently that's a taco trade is one where you're basically betting that his promise of imposing tariffs are actually not going to happen. So you buy when certain companies dip because of anticipation for the tariffs, but you're betting that this guy's always going to choke, essentially, and that he's cowardly.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it has actually nothing to do specifically with
digestion,
a food. And it's just the name of it. And so these taco trades, and a reporter made the mistake, obviously you got to do it, asked him about it. And he had, honestly, his reaction, we won't play it again. You saw it yesterday, I think. He completely falls apart. Completely falls apart. It feels like there's nothing that could set him off more than the idea that he is cowardly and he's chickening out, because his whole thing is bravado. And it's not just that, like, it's coming from Wall Street. And there is no doubt in my mind, there is a dynamic between a guy who is a real estate developer in New York and the implication of Wall Street money.
Oh, yeah.
And that relationship between finance and his real estate.
Well, he's obsessed with the stock market, too, right? And he's desperate, I think, always throughout his whole life to be taken seriously by the real money people.
Indeed. And on top of that, like, theoretically, you all remember that we played that video early on this year of him right after he won the election in 2017 or 2016, walking into the 21st Club or whatever it was.
We'll get your taxes down.
And I'm going to get your taxes down. These are his people.
Yeah.
And the fact that they're making fun of him behind his back, this is the thing. And I generally don't buy into, like, Donald Trump's going to be really mad if you retweet this meme. But this is different, because this is not, he's orange or his hair is whatever.
And it's also, unfortunately, creating the wrong incentives for him, because it's trying to get him to engage clearly in more, like, risky, destructive tariff negotiations to create more uncertain. Like, why are we egging him on with this?
Well,
is the question.
Here's the thing, is that, like, I am of the mind that you don't back down because you're afraid that he's going to do something crazy, because that's exactly what he wants. However, there are consequences to that. Scott Bessant went on the yesterday and on Fox News to talk about the supposed negotiations with China. And the bottom line is China basically said to us, F you. We don't need you.
Yeah.
We're not going to bend to your demands. We're just not. You want to end this relationship? End it. And here's Scott Bessant, who, a week or two ago was saying, like, we got this. We got so many deals on the table. And here he is today. He's got a signal to his business friends. That's what's going on here.
Right.
And what about China, specifically China, and that obviously started in a different place? How can you characterize those talks now?
I would say that they are a bit stalled. I believe that we will be having more talks with them in the next few weeks, and I believe we may at some point have a call between the president and party chair Xi.
so stalled. There was a time when the president thought that it was moving forward pretty significantly.
Again, I think that given the magnitude of the talks, given the complexity, that this is going to require both leaders to weigh in with each other. They have a very good relationship, and I am confident that the Chinese will come to the table when President Trump makes his preferences known.
All right, so let me go.
Okay,
from,
wait. No,
Tara-
just first off, I'd like to see him when he's exuding not confidence. He thinks the talks will start in the next few weeks. He thinks eventually Trump and Xi will talk on the phone, and then he believes that unless they do, nothing's ever going to happen. That is not
Leadership?
well. He clearly is just sitting in the bleachers for this.
They're at the
this
whims
entire thing.
of the Mad King. It just depends on how he rolls over in the morning and what he decides to do. And that's the whole administration is designed to that effect.
Now, the Mad King turns out to also be a coward, both in the fact that he's now been told to his face, you chicken out every time. Basant goes on television yesterday, and he's told that he chickens out. That happened on Wednesday night, right? And he's fuming. And there's no doubt that he has not slept a wink because of that. And then Basant gets on there and says, basically, I can't do anything, and nobody short of the president can do anything because we can't tell what the president wants us to do.
Right.
And so he's fuming. He's mad that he's getting mocked by people on Wall Street. And this is what he comes out with. There's two things he actually came out with. One, he came out going after Leonard Leo because Leonard Leo had promised him, if you choose my judges, they'll never go against you. And it was a Trump-appointed judge who went against him on the tariffs.
It was a 3-judge panel, Reagan, Trump, and Obama, unanimous, that went against this, just the emergency authority with the 1977 law. So we said this yesterday, but the aluminum and steel tariffs that affect the auto industry, they were used under a more traditional authority where you have to apply and then seek public comment. But the schizophrenic Liberation Day tariffs are the ones that are affected by this.
And a huge portion of the Chinese tariffs are part of this sort of Liberation Day. And, okay, so this is where he goes after Leonard Leo, and he refers to them. He says, the U.S. Court of International Trade incredibly ruled against the United States of America and desperately need tariffs, but fortunately the full 11-judge panel on the U.S. Court of Appeals has stayed the order by the Manhattan-based Court of International Trade. The implication, of course, that this has something to do with the fact that it's in Manhattan, other than the fact that, Manhattan's probably the center of where these trade deals are actually executed. Where do these initial 3 judges come from? How is it possible for them to have potentially done such damage for the United States of America? They all 3 come from America. And as Emma said, Reagan and
Trump and Obama.
I was new to Washington. It was suggested I used the Federalist Society as a recommending source on judges. I did so openly and freely, and then realized they were under the thumb of a real sleazebag named Leonard Leo.
Let's go.
A bad person who, in his own way, probably hates America and obviously has his own separate ambitions. We'll go through this in a bit. But so what does Trump do? Then today, he says 2 weeks ago, China was in grave danger. The very high tariffs I set made it virtually impossible for China to trade, in capital letters, I don't know why, into the United States marketplace, which is by far number 1 in the world. We went, in effect, cold turkey with China, and it was devastating for them. Many factories closed, and there was, to put it mildly, civil unrest. Now, incidentally, all of that is untrue. I mean, blatantly untrue. There was no civil unrest in China because
There was
of
a
the
guy
trip.
who stood in front of a tank with some groceries. That's an old-fashioned word, groceries.
No, Trump's like the guy, like the ex, like she's definitely not over me. She thinks about me all the time. China's like, we can do this all domestically. We don't care about you. You rely on our cheap goods.
Also, the rest
idiot.
of the world buys from us, too.
Exactly. And then he says, I saw what was happening and I didn't like it. For them, not for us. In other
So
words,
empathetic.
I'm a good guy. I'm nice. I saw that. So I made a fast deal with China in order to save them from what I thought was going to be a very bad situation. And I didn't want to see things happen. This is where like a significant portion of Republican voters go, Donald Trump is so benevolent. Like he even shows grace to our Chi-Com and enemies.
I guess we will sacrifice so that China doesn't have civil unrest now.
Yes. What a good guy. But then they stabbed him in the back. Because of this deal, everyone quickly stabilized and China got back to business as usual. They must have reopened those factories and the civil unrest calmed down. Everybody was happy. That is the good news. The bad news is that China, perhaps not surprisingly to some, has totally violated its agreement with us. So much for being Mr. Nice Guy. In other words, he is backfilling. I didn't chicken out on the tariffs with China. I helped them out.
Yes.
I was a nice guy.
But this is where we have to, make chicken taco out of chicken shit and create a situation where Trump is like now that we can exploit this fissure with Leonard Leo, right? Trump always chickens out of throwing Leonard Leo into a cold, dark cell.
I think you're overusing the taco metaphor.
Stop trying to make taco work, Emma.
Taco, you're just trying to shove it into every meal.
Trying to shove tacos down my throat.
Taco chicken into chicken shit? What? What are you saying?
I was trying to be creative.
So folksy.
Chicken salad out of chicken shit. That's the phrase. Chicken taco out of chicken shit. There's no judgment in brainstorming, and I really feel like my creativity
We
is
should
being
do this
stifled.
before the show.
It's like legalized comedy.
All right, we got to take a break in a minute, and we'll talk to David Dayen. We're going to do a simulcast with him. Did you know that Fast Growing Trees is the biggest online nursery in the U.S.? Well, yes, you did know that because I've told you many, many times. They have thousands of different plants. They have over 2 million happy customers. I have been one for 10 years, way before they decided to advertise on this show. I mean, I don't know that they even know that I've used their stuff. But they have all your plant needs for your yard and for your house. They got shade trees. They got fruit trees. They got privacy trees. They got shrubs. They got grass. They got flowering bushes, non-flowering bushes, berry bushes. Wolfberry, have you ever tried that?
No.
It's like a superfood. I got a couple of bloomerangs. They're lilac, like trees that look like sort of like lollipops, and they bloom in early May and then in July again. They have an Alive and Thrive guarantee that ensures your plants arrive happy and healthy. That means no going to big box stores with a incredibly stingy and limited selection of different trees, and they got like one variety of apple. Then you put it in your car, it breaks, and then all the dirt pours out, and then you're back to where you began. They ship it to your place lickety split as it was. They got a 14-point quality checklist, ensures you're getting the best quality plants possible. You can also talk to one of their experts about your soil type, about your landscape design, about your how to care for your plants, how to establish their roots, whatever else. If you want to do your own research, don't like talking to people, they've got a resource center full of tips. They got a zone finder so you can figure out like what plants are best for where I live in terms of the climate. Just a great resource for plants. I mean, you want to put stuff in your house, you can get a fig tree. I mean, it's awesome. Fast Growing Trees has the best deals, up to half off on select plants and other deals. Listeners to our show get 15% off your first purchase when using the code MAJORITY at checkout. That's an additional 15% off at fastgrowingtrees.com. Using the code MAJORITY at checkout, fastgrowingtrees.com. Code is MAJORITY. Now is the perfect time to plant. Use Majority to save today. Offer valid for a limited time. Terms and conditions may apply. We'll put the link in the podcast and YouTube descriptions. Also, sponsoring the program today, ExpressVPN. Using the internet without ExpressVPN is like taking a call on a train or a bus on speakerphone for everybody to hear. You really want the whole train to know about what's going on with your family or your medical test results or hear your taco jokes, whatever it is, you don't. Want to thank ExpressVPN for supporting the Majority Report. Visit expressvpn.com/majority. You can get an extra free 4 months for free. All your internet traffic flows through their servers. So internet service providers and mobile network providers know every single website you visit. And in the U.S., ISPs are legally allowed to sell that information to advertisers. ExpressVPN reroutes 100% of your traffic through secure encrypted servers so your ISP can't see your browsing history. It hides your IP address, makes it extremely difficult for third parties to track your online activity. It's easy to use. One button fires up the app, click one button, and you are protected. Works on all sorts of devices, iPads, what do you call the generic iPad? Tablets, your TV, your phone, it doesn't matter. Super easy to use, and particularly hugely important if you're ever on a public Wi-Fi. Never do that without a VPN. Whenever I go to the airport, I used to freak. Now I'm secure. I just make sure that I have pressed that button. I usually just leave it on anyways. ExpressVPN. Protect your online privacy today by visiting expressvpn.com/majority. That's expressvpn.com/majority. And you can get an extra 4 months free. expressvpn.com/majority. Okay, folks, quick break. And when we come back, David Dayen, executive editor of the American Prospect. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. And we are also simulcasting right now to the American Prospect audience and have with us the executive editor of that very same publication, David Dayen. David?
Thank you. I will welcome my audience to the weekly roundup, and I will welcome the Majority Report audience.
Yes.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for outclassing me in terms of the dress today. I've already been told that what I'm wearing looks like I slept in it practically. So
Sam's getting bullied a little bit, but
that's all right. I can handle it.
I'm happy to join in, as usual.
That's very kind of you. I want to talk about a piece, but before we do, you guys are running I don't know what you call it, a feature, or I mean, you've done this in the years now that you have been the executive editor, where you guys focus on one particular angle of what is going on within our government without it. And the scam economy series, I guess, that you're doing. I mean, tell us a little bit about that, because there's some great stories there that people need to check out.
Right. So it's part of our June print issue. And we actually, send out dead trees to people if they want them. And so one thing we were thinking going into that is that when you look at the Trump administration, one of the hallmarks, and we've seen even more of this week, is kind of this nullification of crime as a thing, as long as you're friendly with the Trump administration, right? And this goes beyond just these sort of splashy, high-profile pardons that have been going on, but it's really about the dismantling of an entire system of enforcement. Many of which affects consumer protection, but it goes to a whole host of factors, whether you're talking about the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is on life support, or elements of the Securities and Exchange Commission, all of these things that protect, whether it's investors, whether it's consumers, whether it's workers, those have been pushed aside. And so what we were thinking about was, okay, what does this mean then? What are the consequences of pulling back on enforcement to this degree? Who is going to come out of the woodwork and capitalize on the fact that crime is effectively legal? Where are the emerging growth markets in scams? And so we identified a handful of these and did a series of pieces, I think 5 features, about some of these areas where these scams can proliferate. And we looked at a bunch of different areas of the economy, everything from financial services to student loans to healthcare to energy efficiency and renewable energy to small business. And we found just some incredible stuff in all of those buckets and had some great reporters and writers bring that to people. So you can, if you look at the Golden Age of Scams tag on our website, you can find all those stories.
Yeah, I misnamed it because of Matt Binder's podcast, but it's the Golden Age of Scams. I mean, we just had Luke Goldstein on the other day to talk about the Genius Act, which is, I guess, slightly different in that it's going to be, or it appears that it's going to be codified in statute, essentially opening the door. But this is all part of a whole in many respects. There are multiple sort of constituencies that are looking for these opportunities to essentially scam people. I mean, I think it's a fairly accurate word, right? I mean, that's what the idea of a scam isn't necessarily that it's like in this sort of gray area in terms of legality, in part because there's nobody there to, I guess, enforce laws that may be on the books, or that some laws are just sort of like rolled back.
Right. And, some of these areas that we were looking at, the previous administration was really on the verge of putting in actual binding constraints on these particular scams to kind of eradicate them. And in some cases, had already eradicated some of these more lurid scams, taken them completely out of the marketplace. And this is in a host of areas. So one of the big pieces we talked about was door-to-door solar scams, solar sales loans. And it's kind of a web between the lenders, these door-to-door solar bros that sell people on rooftop solar, and fintech companies that kind of put it all together along with the contractors. And the CFPB under Biden was doing workshops. They were looking, taking testimony from people, looking very directly at this issue, and we're on the verge of putting together regulations on it. And then the party changeover happens and CFPB kind of becomes a non-entity. And now these scams are ready to proliferate. What I say in the intro to this series is that there's an old, there's kind of an old concept in finance and in the economy more broadly called Gresham's Law. And what that means is the short version of it is bad money pushes out good money. And, at the time, Gresham, this was during the Elizabethan age in England, and there were a lot of sort of private currencies out there. And the ones that were willing to be deceptive were getting, the dishonest businesses were pushing out the honest businesses. And you see this across a broader segment of the economy. So if you have an honest business that's trying to sell rooftop solar to people, but you're trying to compete with these sort of deceptive organizations that sign people up to high cost loans and maybe don't do the work at all, there's just lower overhead in scamming people than there is in actually providing a good product and a good service at a fair price. So the bad businesses are going to push out the good ones. And this is sort of the pattern that we see repeated over and over in these stories, is that it's impossible for honest business to compete with dishonest ones.
Let's turn to Trump achieving his goals, because I don't know if, I don't know how much, there, and we've said this from the beginning, in the run up to this administration, that destruction of our government functioning is much easier than sort of building it out. Right. And it's much easier to essentially handicap the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the SEC, whatever, the Federal Trade Commission. I mean, on and on. These agencies that are supposed to protect citizens from scams in various ways. It's much easier to tear them down than to actually establish goals of they're going to fix these things. It's obviously just much easier to do. I think, at least from the perspective of the constituencies that support Trump, I don't know if he's sophisticated enough to know, we've got to make it easier for these specific scams to continue on. But I do think that the constituencies that support him are moneyed interests that largely just don't want regulation on businesses and want to maximize their profit on the backs of people in one form or another. To the extent that he has any, go ahead.
One of the constituencies, per se, that is wanting that type of deregulation so that they can engage in this wild amount of enrichment is the Trump organization, right?
Yeah.
I mean, one of the pieces, we had Jacob Silverman, who you've probably had on the show, who is a real expert in
our
the crypto
former
industry.
AM Quickie.
Is that right?
Right. Yes.
There you go. So we had him to write about, the sort of interlocking set of crypto businesses that the president and his family have taken on everything from meme coins to DeFi, which is I forget what it even stands for, but as part of Trump's social, they're putting in a financial services operation.
Decentralized
decentralized finance.
Yeah.
That's right.
Thanks, Matt.
And thank you. And all of the other various things, and the new, Trump has. You talked about the Genius Act, and that was regulation to sort of legitimize stablecoins. Trump, through World Liberty Financial, which is one of the crypto firms that the Trump organization owns, is starting its own stablecoin, and they named it USD1.
Yes.
Really to associate it with the U.S. dollar. So there are a host of these things, and it's a vehicle for bribery, a vehicle for a foreign country saying, "Hey, I just bought $2 billion in your meme coin. How about some favorable treatment on trade?" There are all sorts of ways that this can proliferate, and ultimately, the retail investors in these various crypto tokens and things like that will be left holding the bag. But that's an instance where, there's no sort of line of demarcation between the government that is making decisions on prosecutorial discretion and what to actually regulate and what not to regulate, and the regulated entities themselves. It's literally the same family,
Right.
and it's the family that happens to be the president of the United States.
I just want to give people, because we covered this a little yesterday, a sense of how insanely corrupt this is. Like, the story of Elon leaving Washington also is because he's a little pissed that there was this AI deal that was given to David Sachs and Sam Altman with the UAE, because the Trump family is all in bed with the Emiratis, but also the Qataris. Pam Bondi, so talking about the cops on the beat, was literally a lobbyist for Qatar before she was with Donald Trump, joined with Donald Trump. And now that was what that whole trip was about. The whole World Liberty Financial thing, they just did a multi-billion-dollar deal with Binance, which was the crypto exchange that the CEO just applied for a pardon with Trump. He pled guilty. He was sentenced to 4 months in prison and was fined tens of millions of dollars. And as I guess that's pending, Trump's company, crypto company, World Liberty Financial, is doing a deal also with the Qataris and with this Chinese cryptocurrency company. And
just to add on to that,
Yeah.
Emma, just this week, the SEC ended all of its investigations of Binance.
Yep.
So, there's this synergy here between,
That's
and
very coincidental.
Yeah.
And Binance isn't the only company where you've seen this. Justin Sun was an investor in the Trump World Liberty Financial situation, and gave like $75 million to underwrite it, and then he magically got pardoned, and his case got dropped. So we've seen this across the board. In fact, the Binance guys, CZ, modeled his pardon application after Justin Sun. And all of this is in the piece. And it's such an enormous scandal that you almost don't believe it when you hear it. And it certainly has not been, described in the media with the enormity of which
Exactly.
it actually is. Yeah.
Now, David, why don't you give Donald Trump any credit for not talking about the swamp anymore? And, because at least he's not being hypocritical about
Right.
it. It would be a lot worse, don't you agree, if he was like, I'm here to clean up the swamp? But he stopped saying that.
He's here to build the swamp. I mean,
Well-
right? There's this like $500,000 invitation only club that his son, you have to give his son $500,000 to be part of the club so you can get special access to the president. I mean, yes, the rhetoric has gone. The rhetoric has gone from both sides. I don't hear Democrats talking about the swamp anymore either, frankly.
No.
Yeah, well, Kirsten Gillibrand is heading the Democrat senatorial campaign committee and is determined, seemingly, to make the Democrats as corrupt as the Republicans on cryptocurrency for some reason. Well, we know the reason. It's Wall Street, New York City. Like, I mean, this whole effort with this Genius Act thing to cement cryptocurrency instead of basically killing it is gonna really scam people. And like, I don't know, David, like, what are the implications of all of this wealth being played around in these circles as opposed to like going back into the economy that would be circulating and like providing actually material goods for people? Because it seems to me that all of these billions and billions of dollars, trillions that are just in speculation for speculation's sake, has to have an effect on everyday people's material experience.
I think one of the reasons we wanted to do this series is because these kinds of growth spurts in scams often lead to a greater financial catastrophe. We saw in 2008 that what was just sort of, a series of penny ante kind of mortgage fraud scams where, they would forge people's signatures on documents to get them mortgage loans. What we learned inevitably was because they were so cross-pressured, these mortgage origination firms, by this desire for more and more loans to securitize, that it built this bubble, and ultimately popped, causing massive pain, including for people who never bought a mortgage or had anything to do with the real estate industry. So if you look at that sort of in the context of crypto, right, what the Genius Act would do, it does a lot of things, but one of I think the major things that it does is it brings this Bitcoin crypto world into the broader financial system. It connects the two in a way that I think Gary Gensler's main project at the Securities and Exchange Commission under Biden was to keep these things separate, so that when we had this meltdown in 2022 with FTX and all these other companies that went under, crypto firms, it did not affect the broader economy because there was this kind of firewall, because you could not sort of have crypto assets tied to things in the real economy. Now, what a stable coin is, right, is a crypto token that is backed by US dollars or backed by real assets in some way. And because we're talking about enormous sums of money, the amount of money in treasury bonds and assets like this that are tied into these stable coins actually have a market moving ability. So if there's a run on a stablecoin, and by the way, no stablecoin to date has kept its peg. Like they always seem to have problems. If that happens now under a regime where it's essentially blessed, and presumably that market will get even bigger, you could have a run on a stablecoin would mean a run on U.S. Treasuries. So the opportunity to cascade out a catastrophe that's localized in crypto into the broader economy is magnified by this legislation that sort of brings it into the perimeter.
And when we talk about these stable coins, we're talking about they're going to be generated by platforms that hundreds of millions of people are already on in many respects, right?
Right.
I mean,
this is the other big problem here is that you essentially have allowed a private currency, constructed by big tech, to be issued and blessed by the government. So, back in, I think, 2018, 2019, Mark Zuckerberg started talking about doing a private currency. He called it Libra, if you remember. Mm-hmm. And on a bipartisan basis, that got completely shot down and ultimately was scuttled. This brings it back under a different form. So you could see, Facebook, and they're already talking about it, building their own currency and saying, well, if you want to do transactions in Facebook, you're going to need to get this token. And that's the way that you sell and buy on Facebook Marketplace, for example. And so then that stablecoin becomes an essential facility for the hundreds of millions, billions potentially of people who do commerce on Facebook. And that just magnifies this even more.
And this whole thing with the Genius Act is that there's essentially none of the banking regulations that would constrain. I mean, what's to stop them? They peg it to the dollar on day one, but on day two, what's to stop them from going like, we've issued a bunch more? So like what?
There was a point a couple years ago where every single major stablecoin issuer was under investigation for exactly what you're talking about. So that's the industry that we're sort of leaning into. The Democrats, 16 Democrats who voted to advance that bill, are leaning into with this legislation.
Ossoff voted for it too, right? And that's because he's concerned about the Sherrod Brown situation. He's arguably the most vulnerable seat in 2026.
Right,
but
you can't separate the situation with the Genius Act and other forms of bipartisan agreement on crypto with money in politics. I believe that the last numbers I saw were that. If you look at all corporate spending in the 2024 elections, half of it came from crypto firms, a massive amount of money. And the 37 races that they took on, I believe they won all of them except for Elizabeth Warren's seat. And that was just sort of token money that was thrown at that. That wasn't even a serious attempt. So, crypto has essentially bought Washington, and now they're calling in the chips. That's what this is about.
Aside from that being arguably one of Donald Trump's goals, self-enrichment, you wrote a piece that, because really the only other agenda he seems to have, other than extension of the tax cuts, are these tariffs. And I don't know that anybody can really say why. He certainly has not been able to articulate what the actual goal of the tariffs is supposed to be. It's both a revenue raiser in his mind, but also a way to build industry. And you sort of can't have both. If it's going to effectively raise revenue, it means that it's not necessarily building new industries in this country, it seems to me. But it's unclear what his goal is other than to impose tariffs and then let the tariff magic work.
It could also be an extension of the first thing, where he likes tariffs because everybody has to come to him and then they have to do some corrupt deal. It's a way to cement his power. But in terms of like an active goal, tariffs seem to be it. And he has not figured out how to do this.
I just think it's really funny. So, you look at the Constitution and it clearly gives the full responsibility for imposing these kinds of duties or imposts, or I forget the exact phrasing in the Constitution, but it clearly gives that authority to the Congress. I mean, like, no doubt, everyone agrees. Over time, Congress has essentially given up that authority, and they've given up that authority in various trade pieces of legislation, whether it was the Trade Expansion Act of 1962 or the Trade Act of 1974. And there are, I read a Congressional Research Service report. There are 6 different ways that a president can impose tariffs that is basically authority derived from Congress delegating it to the president. Trump picked the one way that did not have the kind of authority placed behind it that would not subject it to judicial scrutiny. There are, hundreds of times where presidents maybe not hundreds, but there are a number of times where presidents have imposed these kinds of tariffs and used the system as it stood, whether it was for national security reasons or various other reasons. Trump instead decided, okay, I don't want to be limited by any, because some of these other things you have to do a fact finding, or you're limited by the amount of the tariff, or
That
how
involves
long it can be
reading.
imposed.
That
Yeah.
involves reading. I don't
He
want to
didn't
do
want
that.
to be
Nah.
constrained by any of that. So he said, okay, here's what we're going to do. This is the quickest way to do it. And you'd think, like, if this is your project, like your 4-year legacy project, you'd take the time. Like, you wouldn't worry if it wasn't
wanna
ready
read.
in the first day.
Delayed
But
gratification.
he's like, no, speed is the most
I
important.
want the marshmallow now.
So what he did was he said, okay, if I use this emergency powers law and just say there's an economic emergency, and that emergency is we have a trade deficit. And so because of that economic emergency, I can impose unlimited tariffs whenever I want on whatever country I want, even if it's uninhabited. That is the path that he went down. And it was the one path that would not only would raise the ire of judges, but would raise the ire of libertarians. You know, if you look at what who is actually the plaintiffs in the case that was decided this week, the lawyers are the Liberty Justice Foundation, which like argue for Second Amendment rights, and a bunch of law professors at George Mason University, which is funded by the libertarian movement. He actually touched a third rail, which was the serious hardcore free marketers, who then found in the International Court of Trade willing people to listen to their arguments.
And of course, first off, Ron Vera said that he could do this. The Navarro's nom de plume,
Ron Vera. Oh, yeah.
And that scumbag Leonard Leo assured him that if he appointed one of his judges, he would always win, I guess.
By the way, so there was a 3-judge panel of the International Court of Trade. It was a highly technical court that hears these kinds of cases. And the 3 judges on the panel were appointed by Obama, Reagan, and Trump. And it was a unanimous ruling. So the Trump judge,
Leonard Leo, told me the wrong
voted
judge.
against. This is the entire reason for that outburst today, is that it was a Trump judge that put this together. It was a per curiam opinion, so no judge actually put their name to it. It was just a unanimous opinion. But a Trump judge said, "Well, no, there's no way for the Constitution to allow full delegation of unlimited authority just if you create a national emergency." And so now they have to think about other means. But the thing about this is important is, this just sort of delays what is a legal authority, right? I mean, he didn't do it the right way, but there are many other ways that are readily available to presidents to impose tariffs. And now today in the Wall Street Journal, they're talking about this Plan B. The International Court of Trade in this ruling said, well, here's a way that you can do actual tariffs based on trade deficits. It's part of this other section of the Trade Act of 1974, and you can do them at 15% for 150 days. So their Plan B is, okay, we'll do that. And then in those 150 days, we will do the findings of fact that allow us to use other authorities to impose, the tariffs that we want. So there is a legal way to do this. They just didn't opt for it. So that's number one. But number two, which is even funnier, is because they went down this road and because the Liberation Day tariffs were based on something that at least this court has found to be illegal. Now we'll see if on appeal it continues that way, and this is probably headed to the Supreme Court. But if, let's say, the Supreme Court says, okay, we agree, We're not going to give Trump the benefit of the doubt on this one. Wall Street matters more to us than Trump, and we're going to go ahead with it. In that instance, all businesses that paid these tariffs are entitled to refunds from the federal government. Think about it. You're talking about thousands, maybe tens of thousands of companies that would then be entitled to a full refund of billions, tens of billions of dollars from the government at a
Pay them
time.
in Trump coins.
Yes, maybe at a time when they're trying to, get a situation where they pass the debt limit. Right, because we're heading up on that this summer.
It seems a little inefficient that we have to now pay back all these companies. But like, I just back to the first point you were making about the emergency authority. I think it's Trump. That's part of the point, in my view, is that he's using emergency authorities both on immigration and on tariffs. The Alien Enemies Act and this 1977 law that allows him to do it unilaterally. Even if he's not able to do whatever his goals are, he's already testing the limits of the Constitution and creating the situation and the precedent where he uses emergency authority for the actions he wants to take is part of the point.
Yeah, I think testing the limits is a good way of putting it. You would think that when there are authorities that are proven and well established, that he could just go ahead with those. On his signature policy, right? But I think there is, at least to Trump and some of his allies, value in seeing, where the Constitution and where the current system limits his conduct. And, if they poke enough and find a place where it's not limited, they'll just flood things into that zone, right? And so, I think there's been, what was it? FDR during the Depression talked about bold and persistent experimentation. This is bold and consistent or persistent experimentation in authoritarianism, right? They're experimenting with where they can break our system down. And they're just going to keep trying that over the next several years until they find a weak point. And, that means that on one level, it looks like failure. And I do think that it's funny that the fact that Trump has this ambition that he keeps flailing at because he doesn't do the reading, right? But at another level, the way Emma's looking at it, it's like, no, they're just trying to find the soft spot. And when they do find it, they're well set up to capitalize on it.
Do you have a sense of where is this stuff coming from? I mean, supposedly Trump Jr. read this book by Peter Navarro, and Peter Navarro in the book cited Ron Vera, who turned out to be him,
an anagram of his name,
to justify all of his theories on trade. And after speaking to Moss Redis, an expert on the workings of the administration.
My taco joke was better than that. Crap.
Yeah, I guess so. I'm just trying to figure out where is this coming from? Because Scott Bessant, we just played a clip before this segment of him, Bessant, of him talking about China, and it's clear this guy has about as much influence about what's happening as you or I do. He's just sort of on the outs of this thing, watching vaguely as to what's going on. He's our Secretary of Treasurer. Who is it? Where is this coming from?
Well, I think once Trump and for many years he has had this kind of very basic view that if you impose tariffs, then you force companies to do their manufacturing in the United States, and then you build a a new Gilded Age where we have a bunch of, jungle-like workers going into these factories, and that's the glorious economy, the McKinley economy that he wants to recreate. So, once you establish that, then he finds sort of willing yes men, people like Navarro, who will put that together for him. And certainly, there's no shortage of yes men in at least this Trump administration. Everyone from Lutnick to Dissent to a certain degree. I don't know who's like going 1, 2, 3. Here's what the policy is, but I'm sure when they brought the options to Trump and they said, okay,
right,
we could use these one tariffs, but we have to write a report, and the report has to get public comment, and then we can impose the tariffs. And this is what we did in the first term. And, we announced it in 2017, and by the middle of 2018,
I'm already bored.
We got
I'm
the
already
Chinese.
bored.
Exactly.
Do the big one.
Or
what's the big one where I get to say it's going to happen? Exactly.
You can say there's an emergency, and then you can do whatever you want. And it turned out you couldn't, but you can see why that would appeal to him.
Well, isn't he also bandying about this idea that tariffs can replace the income tax? I feel like this doesn't get talked about enough, but it reminds me of the gold standard libertarians from a while ago. Like, this is real weird conspiracy right-wing stuff about like the nature, like that's almost libertarian, but the tariffs aren't.
Well, that was my point.
I mean,
if it raised the money that they were talking about it raising to replace the income tax, which of course is absurd, it's not going to. But if it did that, it would mean only that Americans are paying this money, and therefore they're buying these products still, and therefore there's no domestic industry that's being built because they're still buying these other products.
Right.
It's an effective transfer from the progressive income tax that we have right now to essentially a flat tax, right? A tax on all goods. And obviously, on a marginal basis, people with lower incomes use a greater percentage of that income to buy those same goods, right? So, it's essentially we're going from progressive to regressive. Every dollar that you transfer into a tariff from the tax system that we have now is a dollar that marginally speaking goes into the hands of the rich. And this is happening all at the same time when they want to change that tax system even more to make it more beneficial for the wealthy.
Is there a timeline as to, how many of these experiments on tariffs he can do? Assuming that Democrats are going to take the House, let's say. Is there any capacity for them to slow this roll? If
not really. I mean, interestingly, with the tariffs that have been invalidated with the national emergency, there is a way for Senate and the House to force a vote on the emergency to basically end the emergency, which would then end the tariffs. And we saw that in the Senate, and it actually got a positive vote to get rid of the tariffs on Canada and Mexico, I believe. And then the House just never brought it up. So under a under a scenario where somehow these emergency tariffs are found legal, there is a path. There were 51 51 senators in a Republican Senate that were willing to do that. So yes, if in 2027 there's a Democratic House, maybe there's a way to invalidate the national emergency, but then you can just sort of start a new national emergency, I suppose. But if he uses the sort of Section 301, Section 201 of the Trade Act of 74, or Section 232 tariffs, I mean, this gets really wonky. But those tariffs are pretty well established in law. Like a lot of presidents have used them, including Democratic presidents. And so I don't really see a way. It doesn't really matter what the makeup of Congress is as to the authority they've already given up to presidents to impose certain tariffs under certain conditions.
So, I mean, briefly, I mean, I know this is so hard to predict at this point. Like, but what is, what like, what is the impact going to be on the economy and inflation? Like, we're not seeing the inflation numbers that I think people started to think we would start to see now. Like, there are anecdotes. Walmart says they're raising prices. I think Target said that they were raising their prices. I saw that style New York Times guy. I can't remember his name, but on Twitter, Derek. Yeah, maybe it was on Blue Sky. J. Crew pants are now like $20 more than they were 5 weeks ago or something. Are we going to see, like, when are we going to start to, it's changing so much aside from the taco trades where people are making money just betting that Trump is going to F this up or back down at any given point. Although now maybe that dynamic has changed. Like, where are we going to first see the implication of either the tariffs themselves or the incredible unpredictability of what the tariffs will be?
Right. I mean, first of all, the fact that he has backed down on numerous occasions means that
not back down. I was being nice.
Yeah, he was being nice. So
felt bad for China.
The fact that that's happened has diminished the impact here because nothing has been in place for more than at the largest number a month. So we just haven't had time to see that manifest into the economy. There was a huge sort of forward movement trade where a lot of companies got their goods in January, February, and March, and locked in those with the lower tariff number, so that 1 month when goods really weren't coming in from China because you had 145% tariffs. If you look at the numbers in the first quarter, the trade numbers are through the roof because people were trying to get their goods in before that number expired. So that's one big reason why we're not seeing the effects yet in stores, is because some of the goods were already here. They bulked up their inventories before the tariffs hit. And, so I think the next few months are going to be really interesting because we had a month of essentially no trade between the U.S. and China. And turning that back on just because they went down to 30%, first of all, some companies might not even be able to afford the 30%. Second of all, Chinese suppliers have kind of moved on. It isn't as easy as, okay, they're down to 30%, get me those goods again. There's a lot of sort of sequencing and stuff that has to go on. Those suppliers might have gone out of business. Those suppliers may be supplying companies in Europe or other companies in other parts of the world. So, U.S. companies have a problem with getting those relationships restarted. Once it takes time for those increases in inventory to sort of draw down. But I think we were just starting to see them draw down as we hit the beginning of May, right before Taco Man decided to do his business. We do a podcast. Matt Stoller and I do a podcast called Organized Money, and we had on a guy who's the CEO of a stainless steel water bottle maker. And we were talking to him about the whole tariff situation. And he said, and this was in early May, he said, I'm starting to get calls from retailers saying, do you have any inventory? I'll take anything you have. And he was one of these guys that pulled his inventory forward. So he did have some inventory that was available. The point is that there were signs and hints of desperation of how are we going to fill these shelves? So the stocks were just starting to go down, and then he pulls off the trade, right? He pulls off the very large tariff. So it's unclear where that landed after he pulled off the tariff. It's going to take some time to reestablish those relationships. And we could, I would say June, July, it's going to be very interesting to see what is happening at your local retailer, particularly in retail establishments that have disproportionately large numbers of Chinese goods. Toy companies, for example.
Dollar Tree.
Dollar stores. I'd take a look in the next couple months and see if their shelves are still stocked and see what their prices are, because that's going to tell the tale. I do think that there was enough of a gap there that we are going to see some serious disruption. We're just not there yet.
Trump's approval rating, Dave Weigel made this point the other day on Twitter, like Trump's approval rating has kind of gone back up again, because I don't think that the hit has happened yet. But just undercutting, as Dave said, the premise that like Chuck Schumer basically said we should just roll over and play dead and let the economy fall apart, and then people will automatically blame Trump for that. Like that's not, and that may happen, but
Taco is a self-preservation instinct that Trump still has. The reason that he chickens out is that he knows that the economy won't be able to sustain his insane ideas. And there is a lizard brain part to this where he's like, okay, yeah, I can only push this so far. And we saw massive rebounds this week in consumer confidence because Trump took off the China trade. And suddenly everyone thinks everything's okay because the effects have not trickled down into people's lives just yet. I think that that's coming, and we'll probably see some moves back in that direction. But, it really depends on how much tacoing goes on. Like, he could pull off all of these. Eventually, he could get around to the idea of what he should have did in the first place, which is ride the Biden economy that was actually working and just message it differently. I don't know that we're going to get all the way back to that, but when he chickens out, it's basically saying, yeah, Biden had a good economy. I mean, that's effectively where he's going with that.
It's called being nice, but you don't get it. You don't get it. David Dayen, always a pleasure. We will put a link to the to your feature on the scam, the golden age of scams.
Yeah, I just want to say real briefly, I can talk about just in abstract. We talked about the crypto story. We talked a little bit about the solar story. We did a piece on medical credit cards. These are, if you go to the doctor and you can't afford it, they will offer you a credit card that has really bad terms.
Put it on layaway?
It's not layaway. It's a credit card. But if you don't pay it off, there's this massive amount of interest that comes in. Sometimes these credit cards are given to people while they're under anesthesia. That's when they're enrolling people.
Oh, my God.
CFPB was working on doing something about this until Trump. I did a piece on student loans. Obviously, we have collections that have returned on student loans. They're garnishing wages. That is opening up the landscape for scammy debt relief companies that say, "Oh, I'll get rid of all your student loan debt," and then they do nothing, but they take $40 a month from you. There are a host of these kinds of scams afoot. And then the piece we have up today by Moch Katzik about merchant cash advance, which is like payday loans for small businesses. And it's populated by this absolute rogues gallery of real, like the lowest part of the economic bottom feeders who have been doing this for years and years and years. And now it's become almost normalized to the degree that you're seeing companies like Amazon get into merchant cash advance, and United Health and other companies doing these payday loans for small businesses. We came up with some great stuff here. And so if you go to prospect.org, look up the golden age of scams, you'll find all of the pieces we have.
David Dayen, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, David.
All right. Thanks a lot.
All right.
Bye.
Okay, folks, we're going to head into the fun half of the program.
It just occurs to me, like, as David's talking about this, how much like this industry of putting things on credit is exploding, or like I can't get over that anecdote that it's not an anecdote, but Katrina Vanden Heuvel did in her piece in The Nation about how like now DoorDash and Klarna, that buy now pay later company, are entering into a partnership. Like if you're getting a $15 sandwich, you're paying it in 4 installments over 8 weeks, and like if you don't pay, you get insane interest charges. And these are like these services that every company is kind of putting in their checkout options, and it's completely unregulated. Like what kind of economic desperation are we in right now? We just hit a record of credit card debt. It's going to keep getting worse.
Yeah, those companies own our politicians.
Yes. Like,
what's their motivation? Do they want people with savings? Because guess what they could do is pay off their debt and not have to pay more interest on it. Of course,
Right.
they don't want that.
right. So it's a bad situation.
Bad situation. There was a couple of things I wanted to plug before we go. Folks, tonight at the Elysian in Los Angeles, the Bituation Room is having a big show. We'll put a link to it. I don't know who the guests are.
Is John Idarola going to be there?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah. So John's a great guy. Francesca, obviously, great. Check those guys out. You can probably meet them, take a picture.
We'll put a link in the podcast and the YouTube descriptions so you can go and check it out. Buy
The
tickets.
left wanted to make comedy illegal, you know.
Now it's going to be legalized. Also, want to draw your attention. Maybe you guys can pop this up. There's a fundraiser. Two different folks let me know about this. As Just Coffee was started basically in support of farmers in Chiapas. The water in Chiapas under siege. Pop this up here. And some folks down there in Chiapas are attempting to build essentially a new reservoir to supply 30 families with clean water and irrigate 50 hectares of crop. There are droughts that are accelerating. There are families that have no backup plan. They're going to practice regenerative farming. The land's going to be divided into 70% forest reserve, 15% water access and reforestation zone, and a 15% regenerative agriculture. It's essentially, basically, the opportunity even for farming in Chiapas is dwindling as it goes. So if you got a couple extra bucks, they're looking to raise as far as I can tell, is somewhere around 80 grand in U.S. dollars.
I think it's about 87,000.
$87,000 in U.S. dollars. So if you have a couple bucks, help them out. You can find it by going to bit.ly /ChiapasWater. Chiapas Water. And we'll put that link in the podcast in the YouTube description. It's a co-op that got building down there. And, obviously, there's a lot of different GoFundMes that are out there. But this type of solidarity, I think, very helpful as a model. So we will put that link in the podcast in the YouTube description. Also, justcoffee.coop, very supportive of their suppliers in Chiapas and in throughout, I think, the African continent. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. Matt, what's happening with Left Reckoning?
Yeah, we had Ro Khanna on to talk. I asked him a question about well, kind of his horrors of socialism bill, but we skirted past that to talk about how America is getting its clock cleaned by, China on issues like rail and BYD and things like that. And he had an answer that I actually appreciate, which is that we have a model in America that we can look toward. And this weekend, Sandeep Vaheesan, who has been on this show, but he has a book called Democracy and Power about public utilities and the need to actually have more things like the TVA, is how I decide to look about creating abundance of particularly energy in America. It's not exactly an airport read; it's more a scholarly. It's University of Chicago Press, and I'd recommend it for anyone who wants to get serious about doing things in the United States of America.
It's not a what?
An airport book.
Oh.
Quick break. We're going to head into the fun half of the program. We will take your IMs. We may take a phone call or two. We got a lot of clips to get to. We'll be right back after this.